Hey guys, today I'm going to be showing you how to do this effect. So you're definitely going to need a few things for this tutorial, all of which are free except for the After Effects software. So what you're going to need is Adobe After Effects. You're going to need two different assets. I will link them in the description. One of them is called Sorcerer Fire and the other one is a pack of spell hits. Again, I will link both of them in the description. They're very easy to get installed. They're both free. And you're also going to need to be sure to take a clean plate. That's just an empty shot of your background. It's super easy to do. I'll walk you through it. So to start things off, open up After Effects and create a new composition. Adjust the settings to match your footage. Then name the file whatever you please. I just chose evaporation. Import all of your media. This includes your footage, your Sorcerer Fire, and your spell hit. As you can see, my footage and all the assets I will be using for this are up in the top left. Trim your footage to begin wherever you want, and then scrub to the point where your actor finishes his exploding motion. Once you are at this point, duplicate your footage layer by pressing Ctrl D on your keyboard while you have the footage layer selected. Then, still remaining at this point, select the top footage layer and press Alt closing bracket to trim your footage to the point where your playhead is. Now, select the footage layer on the bottom and scrub to a point where your actor has walked out of the scene. This will act as your clean plate. Once you are here, right-click on that footage layer, go to Time, and then hit Freeze Frame. Now when you play the footage back, you should see something like this. Your actor should begin to do the exploding motion, and then right at its peak, he should disappear. Now you need to track your Sorcerer Fire asset to your actor's chest. To do this, go to the panel on the right side of the screen where you see things like Info, Audio, Preview, Effects and Presets, and scroll down to the bottom. Towards the bottom, you should see a tab called Tracker. Also, real quick, a little bit of clarification that I'm adding in during editing. Before you do any of what I'm about to say, you need to make sure that your playhead is in the position where you want your Sorcerer Fire to appear. Open up that menu. While having your primary footage layer with your actor in it selected, hit Track Motion, and you should see a dot labeled Track Point 1 appear on the screen. Zoom in so you can better see it, and then position this dot to be on your actor's chest, stomach, or really wherever you want it to be. You'll notice that there's two boxes on this track point. The box on the inside is telling the tracker what you want it to track. The box on the outside is telling the tracker where it should be looking. So make the box on the outside big enough to where you can differentiate what you are trying to track from the area around it, and make the box on the inside big enough to encompass the entirety of what you're actually trying to track. Now, over on the right side, next to Analyze, hit the play button. This should begin to track your point automatically. If you don't have a very good track point, or it doesn't seem to be tracking properly, there's an alternative where you can hit the play button on the far right that says Analyze one frame forward and manually position your tracker onto the track point frame by frame. This is more tedious, but if it's not working the other way, this is really the only way you're going to be able to do it. I did get kind of lucky here, and I actually didn't plan this out, but there is a pretty big dot on my shirt that makes it a lot easier for After Effects to track my point. Again, if this isn't here, there are ways to get around it, but it will be just a little bit more time consuming. Let After Effects track this point all the way until your actor begins the exploding motion. Once your actor begins the exploding motion, we're going to get rid of the Sorcerer Fire anyways, so you don't need to worry about tracking it anymore after that. As you can see towards the end of my track, the track point kind of starts to go crazy. That's an example of when you would start going one frame at a time and just adjusting it to where it needs to be. But I'm not really going to worry about it because those points are after the Sorcerer Fire won't be there anymore, so I'm not going to bother readjusting them because the Sorcerer Fire will never actually be tracked to those points. Once you're all good with how the motion has been tracked, go down to your timeline, right-click an empty space, and go to New, Null Object. Then on the right panel, hit Edit Target and choose your null object that you just created. Go back to the right panel and hit Apply. It'll bring up a menu saying X and Y. Click OK. If you scrub through your footage, you should see that new null object you just created is now going along the path that your tracker was. Now it's time to drop in your Sorcerer Fire asset. Scrub over to the frame where you want your sorcerer fire to appear again, and then position your sorcerer fire asset to start at that point. Once it's in the right spot, click on the sorcerer fire layer and hit T on your keyboard. This will bring up your opacity settings. Go to the beginning of the clip and hit the stopwatch next to opacity. Set the value that is currently at 100 to 0. Then go forward about 5 frames using page up and page down on your keyboard, and change the value back to 100. This will make your sorcerer fire kind of quickly fade in instead of just appearing out of nowhere. It'll look a lot better. Now position your sorcerer fire to be wherever you want it to be on your actor. Go over to the bottom left panel where you can see all of your footage, and on the far right you should see a little section called Parent and Link. Go to your main footage layer and then click and hold on the little swirly thing that you see in the corner. Then start dragging your mouse while still holding it down over to null 1. Once you're hovering over null 1, release your mouse. This will parent the sorcerer fire asset to the null. And remember, the null contains all of your tracking data, which means that now your sorcerer fire will be tracked to your actor's chest. Go to the point where your actor begins to explode and trim your sorcerer fire asset to end at that point. Now drag in your spell hit asset. The spell hit asset is not transparent by default, so you're going to need to go over to the layer and switch the blend mode to add like I'm doing here. Position the spell hit to be wherever you want it to be, and then scale it up so that it's the correct size when it explodes. By correct size, I just mean when it explodes, you want to be sure it's actually covering the width of your entire actor so it looks like it's fully evaporating them. Now that your spell hit is in the right place, select your footage layer, select the pen tool up in the top of your screen, and then scrub to a point to where the spell hit starts to kind of actually explode like I am on here. Once you're here, start drawing a little outline with the pen tool around the inside of the explosion. This mask does not need to be precise. It does not need to look amazing by any means. It can be very rough. Once you connect the end point of the mask to the beginning point, you should see your actor disappear except for the point that you have masked around. But we actually want to do the opposite. So select your footage layer and then hit M on your keyboard. This will bring up all of the mask options. You should see a little drop down that says masks and then another drop down that says mask 1, the mask you just created. Right next to where it says mask 1, you can either change the drop down from add to subtract, or you can just check the checkbox that says inverted. You should see now that the area inside of the mask is being subtracted and your actor is seemingly disappearing. Under the mask 1 drop down, hit the stopwatch where it says mask path. Then go forward a frame and adjust the mask to where it grows with the inside of the explosion, like I'm doing here. You can see the explosion is kind of eating away at our actor now. This is what we want. You also don't necessarily have to go forward 1 frame at a time. If there's 2 frames where the area of the inside of the explosion is basically the same as the last, all you gotta do is just go forward like 2 frames until the explosion actually changes, and then adjust your mask accordingly. Continue to do this until the point where the explosion has basically lost all of its form and there's really no inside of the explosion anymore. Right about here is kind of the point I'm talking about. You can see that like the explosion has just kind of completely scattered everywhere. There's no true like inside anymore. Once you're at this point, go back down to your mask options and hit the stopwatch on mask expansion. Then go forward however many frames you want. I did 4. I also had to extend my footage layer just a little bit because it ended 3 frames from where I started. You can do the same if you want. It all really matters just what looks good to you. Once you're however many frames forward you want to be, just crank up the mask expansion value until your actor is completely gone. I also noticed that I really didn't like how fast the mask expansion keyframes worked, so I just messed around with values of those, just spread out the keyframes a little more. Again, it's your project, your creative freedom. You can mess around with these values all you want. Also, one thing you're definitely going to want to do, you can see me doing it here, is go back to your main footage layer and then go under the mask settings and turn up the mask feather a decent amount. If you don't have the mask feather on at all, you're just gonna have a really rigid edge along your, like, the inside of your explosion, and it won't look very good. Just turn up the mask feather to whatever looks good to you. Now I'm playing through the footage and I think it looks good. So all I need to do is just go back and adjust these colors, because as you've probably noticed, the sorcerer fire and the spell hit are not the same color, and they should be. So to do this, go over to the sorcerer fire, select it, and then go up to the effects and presets tab and search tritone. Drag this tritone effect onto your sorcerer fire in your timeline. You will see on the left, you'll now have settings to adjust regarding tritone. Click midtones and adjust it to be whatever color you want. For me, I intentionally made my sorcerer fire the default color of the spell hit, so they're already the same color, so I don't need to actually adjust the color of the spell hit. If you want to change your color of your spell hit, you can do the exact same thing I just did, just don't pick the same colors. Now, as a final step, go up to the Effects and Presets tab and search Glow. Take just the standard glow and drop it onto your sorcerer fire and your spell hit. Play around with all the settings on the glow to make it look however you want. Once you've applied your glow to both of your assets, if you're happy with the way everything looks, you're done.